Good morning, Lethbridge and Southern Alberta, and wherever you are listening to in the world. This is Feel the Beat with DJB. We'll be on Jess FM and Jess TV. Later on today, I will post this interview. We're doing it sort of a live remote here from DJB's house. I'm Brent. And we're doing it that way because we are having a little bit of connection problems and server problems, so we do it this way. But I wanted to get the interview on anyway with our very special guest, former NHL player for the Philadelphia Flyers and the Edmonton Oilers, Tom Gorence. Tom, thank you for being on today. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Brett. It's a pleasure being here, and it's a beautiful day down here in the Southern California desert.
Oh, that's awesome. So where do you live in California?
It's a little town about 40 minutes out of east of Palm Springs, California, called La Quinta. Nice little golfing community. Obviously, most hockey players like to golf, so it's one of the things that environment is golf. Yeah, so
for sure. So that's kind of a long ways from Minnesota, where you grew up.
Yeah, I definitely don't miss the cold there. I think I left Minnesota at 18 or 19, so really haven't been back except to visit. But yeah, do not miss the Minnesota winters.
No, I don't suppose. Yeah, it's the same up here. We got this huge dump of snow and it's crazy. Everybody's driving nuts and whatever. So you were born in St. Paul, Minnesota. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And so you kind of grew up there when the Minnesota North Stars were sort of coming in. I think they were the expansion in 1967, I believe. And they came in. And so what prompted you to want to pursue a career in hockey?
Well, obviously growing up in a cold environment like that, the sports obviously in the winter were hockey. I started a little bit later than most. My brother was also a very good hockey player as young, so I kind of followed his footsteps. But I really didn't start playing organized hockey till I believe I was around 9 or 10, which is way behind the curve with, most of my players and friends that I played with in Canada. They were skating at 3 and 4, and so I got a little bit of a late start. But the more I played it, I just fell in love with the game. It's, such a dynamic sport. And that was really the basis, was just growing up and my friends were playing. And it was kind of peer pressure. They were playing and they were very good. I wasn't a very good skater to start with. And once I found out that they were skating circles around me, I said, well, I'm not going to have any more of that. So it was a lot of getting out in the ponds and lakes and get out there and, get those skills going.
Yeah, and that's kind of what a lot of kids have done here in Canada growing up. It's ponds and lakes because we have winter, like, I don't know,
yeah.
Here, right? So you got to kind of play on the ponds and stuff. I often wondered why hockey, like in some of the states like Minnesota where there's snow in that, why it wasn't bigger in some of the larger cities in that, and some of the other states until they got hockey teams, right? And, it seems like the original 6 were big, but they don't really play hockey, or hockey isn't really well known even still in the States, is it? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, I think it's, it's kind of changed over time. Obviously, like you mentioned, the teams that came in, the North Stars, an expansion team, Philadelphia, when they came in, obviously in the early things, but you had the main 6. So you had Michigan. So Michigan had a very good youth program, minor leagues, because we used to play in tournaments like they call the Silver Stick Tournament when you're in minor league hockey. And so I think it's kind of been a slow progression of growth. I mean, now you see NHL players that are born in California. They were born in California. So I think that trend's kind of changed. And then after the 80 Olympics, you had the Herb Brooks influence, what I called an NHL, which not that I was a super fan of, although you think it would be because I was a skater, but it got to be more of European style versus the old static. If you remember the old 6, was up and down, you skated your zones and that. So The game kind of developed into a very freewheeling open game, which I think is good for the fans. It's a really exciting thing to watch. So I think it's slowly, obviously with TV now, you've got cable and TV revenue coming into the teams. There's more people watching it, and I think more kids get exposed to it. And obviously the more exposure you get, the more chance you do to want to go try it out as a child.
Yeah. And nowadays marketing is pretty huge. Like it seems like every single team is doing third jerseys and a different take on their jersey. And I always found it fascinating that the Montreal Canadiens have never altered their jersey. They've had a third anniversary jerseys or whatever sometimes, but they've never altered their jersey, right?
Yeah, amazing.
You know, the church of hockey, you might say, or whatever the Montreal Canadiens are, right? So that's kind of cool. So you drafted.
Yeah,
What's that?
I said, yeah, and if you've been on the Forum, I remember stopping on the ice the first time at the Forum when you're sitting there next to the fans and you're on the bench and you look at the people that have played there, Andre Richard, John Beliveau. I mean, just the history of those rinks. I kind of missed that when they went to the big new rinks as they've changed. It has to change, but the old Boston Garden, you know, the old in Detroit, the Olympia. I mean, some of those, the history. It was just fun to be able to touch that ice and skate on it. Skated on it with, you know, people in the past that were, you know, such a big part of hockey.
I bet the atmosphere was incredible in there. You know, the crowd right in on you and everything too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers in 1977, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second round, 35th overall. It was a big thing for me having played in the university at that time under Herb Brooks, who, you know, God rest his soul, has passed away. But I mean, you know, we had a very good program there at the University of Minnesota. And when I remember Herbie was actually at my house when Keith Allen called and they wanted to know if I was going to stay in school or if I was going to turn pro. My parents were kind of iffy on saying, hey, why don't you just stay in school? You never know. And I was like, wow, I'm young. I could go 2 or 3 years. If I really don't make it, I can still come back and go to the university. I can still get an education. So I was really excited, and Herb Brooks was very supportive of it. So it was a good thing for me.
Oh, that's cool. It's you never coached or played under his coaching, did you, though?
Yeah, Herb Brooks.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I was in my freshman year. The year I got actually that next year I got drafted on my 19th birthday. Yeah, I was still at the University of Minnesota under Herb Brooks.
Okay.
Pretty instrumental in kind of molding me too in the way I played.
So what was it like playing for the Philadelphia Flyers in the 70s? You know, remember they won the Cup in 74 and 75, I believe. And it seems like that team just had such amazing chemistry, and just the work ethic of that team was incredible.
Yeah, I think, Brent, you hit it on the head. It was the chemistry there between the team, you know, management, the owner, Ed Snyder, and the fans who were, I mean, if you played in Philadelphia and you just had to work and gave it your all, you know, you never got booed or whatever. So I remember stepping on the ice the first time. I think we were playing the Islanders in an exhibition game. I think it was my first time on the Spectrum ice, and you could feel the electricity. And you could actually feel, not the fear, but I mean, Clark Gillies talks about it a lot. Bobby Nystrom talks a lot about coming over the bus over that bridge when the Flyers were known as the Broad Street Bullies, that you were going to be in for a serious, tough game. So it was really nice to be able to play in that when I first came with the Flyers, because, wow, it was almost like having an advantage because you just felt that aura.
Yeah, for sure. So on the Philadelphia Flyers, you played with some great players. Who was the most intense player you played with on the Flyers?
Oh, Bobby Clark by far. I mean, our captain at that point. You know, I always looked at Clark, you know, and even now joke a little bit about, you know, he was never a great skater. I mean, he was not an efficient skater. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, but he got everywhere he needed to go and came in with obviously a bad attitude all the time. And obviously, was the leader. I mean, he was just the leader of the team. And man, if you didn't give it your all, he let you know it. So you did not want to let down Bobby Clark when you're out there playing.
Yeah, that's the mark of a great leader. And that it seemed like he would go through brick walls to lead the team. That's just the sort of vibe you got off of him when he played.
Well, and I think that was really if you came to the Flyers, that expectation was there. You know, you knew he was there. You knew you had to go to a next standard. So if you looked at the Flyers, we had a lot of talented players too. So, you know, you had your Reggie Leaches, your Rick McLeishes, Bill Barbers, and people that were super talented. And then you had your guys that I would call, you know, we used to call us plumbers. You know, we were the guys that were the day-to-day, you know, lunchbox guys. But you performed because Bobby Clark was there. So he helped raise a lot of guys' careers, just the fact that he was there. That may have not made it on any other team, simply for the fact that he pushed you.
Right. Yeah. And that's really amazing when someone can do that. So after the Flyers, you went to the Edmonton Oilers. And what year was that? Was that around like 83, 84 era?
Yeah. That was the 84 season. Yeah, it was kind of the end of I had a kind of a, my Flyers career there. I had a couple of up and downs with some coaching things and some personality things. I was going through divorce also in my life, which was not really good. So there were some issues that kind of changed my career in some directions. So I was just really picked up, luckily, on I think it was a free agent by Edmonton, and started out in Moncton. And then during their cup run that in 84, I believe Yari Curry got hurt. Tommy Rowe was playing, and him and I were the right wings in Moncton. And Tommy Rowe falls into the boards, hurts his back. I was just coming off of a shattered ankle, and I was probably 75%. Well, they were looking, I forgot, they were looking to bring up one player, and they obviously wanted a veteran. So they asked me, can you go? And I'm looking, the trainer's looking at me like, there's just no bloody way. You can skate to your 75%, but you're not even. I said, I'm jumping up and down the training room with my taping on. I can go, no problem. So they called me up for that, I think it was 13 games prior to the playoffs at the end of the season. So it wasn't a long stint there, but I had obviously a great chance to sit out there and play with Wayne and Glenn Anderson and, Yari and those guys when he came back. But yeah, it was
exactly 13 games is 13 games. So, hey, anytime you get a chance.
Yeah.
and
I did have a
What was that like? What was that team like, the 84 team of the Oilers there? Like, that was just an electric team through their cup runs. But what was that like, electricity in there?
They had a lot of the same chemistry. And I don't know if that was Glenn Sather or obviously Wayne and those guys on the team, but probably one of the most talented teams I think has ever been put together in the Stanley Cup that went that run. You could do that with the Islanders who beat us. Games, they had a very talented team, very similar to us in a way, but they had a couple other dynamics, which I think kind of changed the thing. They had a very offensive defenseman in Dennis Potvin, so we didn't have that. Philly was always the defense. We're pretty much stay at home. We didn't have any really good offensive defensemen where they did. So, and that you could see that change in the league as it went forward. Yeah. But they had a very good chemistry as well. And you knew once they played that they were going to be tough to beat. So,
yeah. Yeah, and Oilers seem to have every single line seemed to be like deadly scoring or great penalty killing or whatever. It was an amazing mix of a team.
Yeah, they had very few weaknesses, if any. I mean, they had Grant Fuhr, Hall of Fame goal. I mean, they had pretty much everything you would need. And they all work together. Like I said, the chemistry is very big in sports. I think you get a lot of superstars that play together, but if they don't have that chemistry with the whole team and everybody fight together, it usually doesn't work.
Yeah, and Mark Messier was one of the leaders, even though he wasn't the captain of the team, but he was one of the leaders. How would you describe Mark Messier's leadership in that locker room? Because he's pretty intense, like Clark.
Yeah, Mark was the same way. I mean, obviously Wayne led in a different way. Wayne was just because Wayne was Wayne. I mean, Wayne would tell you to go do it this way, and you're looking at him going, yeah, easy for you to say. You're probably one of the most talented guys out there, if not. And Mark was an intense guy, so I would compare him very similar to Bobby Clark in a sense. Very intense out there, always led by example. Never gave it less than 100% every time he stepped on the ice. And you always respected that. You look at these players that you play with, and he was one of those guys that he wanted to win. Like anybody who really plays the sport for the reason, he wanted to win. And he, like I said, gave it 100% out there.
That's great. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. So I'm going to ask you a couple of hockey-related questions as far as who you think at the time the best player was, or who your favorite player was to play against. So who was your toughest, who you felt your toughest player was playing against when you played?
Mike Bossy for the Islanders by far, probably one of them. Because I had to cover him a lot of times when we played, and obviously Mike was a sniper. I look at it now, and if you put Mike Bossy where Ovechkin takes those shots with no defenseman really checking you, Mike would put probably 90% of those shots in the net. Yeah. He was very smart, and so very tough to cover. So yeah, I definitely have Mike up there. There was obviously a lot of players. Yeah. On Clark Gillies too, playing against Clark, or Bobby Nystrom, had some battles with him, just checking back and forth, bam, bam into the board. So a lot of intensity, but those three probably are the most.
Who was the best goalie you ever faced?
Wow. Best goalie, probably Tretiak over in Russia, but from a standpoint of the NHL, there was a lot of strong standout goaltenders. I mean, obviously you had Grant Fuhr. I'm trying to think of the other. Oh God, you got me on that one. There's so many of them that were just
goalies, isn't there? And so many Hall of Fame goalies. And
oh God, yes. I mean,
right,
Montreal goalies.
People always like Grant Fuhr, and he had a terrible goals against average. But if you look at the type of team that Oilers was, basically, Grant Fuhr was the type of guy, from watching hockey, he would not let the next goal in.
Right.
It's just my perspective on him, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was always when you needed to be big, come up big. I mean, you had obviously a lot of great goaltenders. Hasek, who played, the Czech, Jesus, he just flop all. I mean, sometimes they come up with saves you just can't believe.
Yeah.
Now when the equipment and the size of these guys, I don't know, anybody can score on them. I mean, they're all 4, 6. You look at the net, like, where is there any space?
Yeah. And that's the thing too. You look back at when Ken Dryden played, every time I see a picture of Ken Dryden, it looks like he's playing with Pee-wee equipment, with little kids equipment, because the guy's like 6'5" without skates on. So he's just
right. No, that's true. Yeah, a lot of tough guys. You had Clint Malarchuk, who had his injury. I deal with Clark now with with this ranch thing that we're trying to do with Barry Beck and Mark Pavlich with his issues and stuff like that. And Clint's a great guy, and he's gone through a lot of things in his life.
Wow,
but there's those goaltenders, man. They're a different breed. I mean, they're a breed. All of them are a different breed.
I played goal in rec hockey for a while, so a little bit crazy. Got to just not give a crap about anything. It seems like, right?
Yeah.
So, post NHL, what did you do after the NHL, and what do you? I mean, obviously you're probably retired now, and doing bike tours and stuff. But what did you do after the NHL for employment?
Well, as most hockey players, you have a name, some sort of name recognition. I hadn't quite finished up my schooling because I left, obviously, the University of Minnesota, was taking some non-matriculated courses at Villanova University in Philadelphia in the off seasons, trying to get my degree, and got fairly close at the end. But then all of a sudden, you've got to earn a living. So I started out doing car leasing. I did some equipment and car leasing with a friend, started that business with him, got out of that, went into regulatory consulting, and we did a thing called computer system validation, which was very up and coming in the world, because everything done in the pharmaceutical world at that time was done with paper. So if you have a new drug application or anything that was going on, it was always paper sent to the Food and Drug Administration. Well, this was a new idea that, since computers were being used, the FDA did not like, they didn't believe or trust computers. So I got into a company, and that was really where my success came from, because I was always in sales. It was always the side that I went to, just because I figured that was the easiest for me. And kind of grew that business to the point where I got out of that and had some money, enough to be comfortable, had some money, and invested it correctly, and moved the family. My wife had some family in Hawaii. We ended up moving over there and stayed there for 14 years. So I retired in 1998 from the working world, which is kind of cool, because I was only 42, basically 42, 43 years old, and was able to just enjoy life with the family and that. So I've been kind of blessed that way.
That's cool. Yeah. So you're into motorcycles and everything. Are you taking up like any other hobbies to pass your time?
Yeah, pretty much golf and riding motorcycles. We have a club here that's almost 100 that comes in from, I have friends from Canada that come down for the season, and they're motorcycle riders, and I'm the president of our club. So very active in doing rides all over Utah, California, Arizona, wherever. So we have a season that runs from October to May.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
That takes up a lot of my time, and I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, that's great. You're watching Feel the Beat with DJB here on Jess FM, Jess TV. Thank you for tuning in today. And we are live videoing with Tom Gorence, former NHL player for the Philadelphia Flyers and Edmonton Oilers. We appreciate him coming in and talking to us today. Thank you, Tom, again. And so down in the States, this year, 2020, has been a very tumultuous year, with the presidential election and then with all that's happening with coronavirus and that. Can you describe to us a little bit about what's happening down there? Because sometimes the news doesn't really give us the full picture.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate it's happening in our country, but it's happened over the last, I don't know, maybe it's been more than 4, maybe 8, 10 years. A real divisiveness where it's been kind of, if you want to call it conservative versus progressive liberal or whatever you want to call it, it's just been it's almost like the Rangers versus the Flyers. If you're a Rangers fan and a Flyers fan, there is no common ground. I mean, it's a hate relationship, and down here with the politics, it's gotten fairly nasty. The unfortunate thing is most of the media, about 90% of it, is pretty liberal based and owned by people like Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, owns Amazon. So the messaging is pretty much whatever they want to give to the American people. So anybody watching the news network, CNN, MSNBC, you're getting pretty much one side of it as the other side's bad. This is the only way to go. And it became, news has become more opinion based and not just, Walter Cronkite in the old days, if you remember Walter Cronkite, I do, because I guess I'm still old enough or old, but, he was a very liberal person in his life, but he just presented the news. He said, here's the news, the facts as it is, you make the decision, or I'll give you both viewpoints, and then you can kind of decide what you think is right. In the States now, it's pretty much they push a bunch of narratives and things, and people glom onto them. So I guess the more you say it, it'd be like me. God, if I told everybody I was a 4-time 20-goal scorer, if I kept saying it, people would start talking about it and being, well, that guy had 4 good seasons, 20-goal season. Well, it never happened, but, people after a while, they say it enough, they believe it.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate that's happening in our country down here.
Yeah, it's kind of happening here as well, where the media, tends to skew things. And we have one of our news networks is government owned, right? It's the CBC. So where Hockey Night in Canada was, right, initially, but, that tends to skew things that way as well. And it can, create a lot of misinformation, even though it's mainstream, right? Which
right.
is sad.
It is sad. It's unfortunate.
There seems to be a lot of controversy surrounding the election as well down there, like whether votes are counted properly, fraudulent and that, like, is that valid, or is that just, people just kind of spouting off because, they're on Donald Trump's side or they're on Biden's side or whatever?
Right. Yeah. It's, it's obviously I'm a very conservative but liberal in social way. Immediately there's no fraud without any kind of investigation. You're kind of like, well, you know what? Maybe you need to look at it a little bit, because as a citizen, whether you're Canadian or American, you want to have a fair election, an honest election. You don't want stuff where people are filling out ballots and they're just getting counted, and they could be people who are deceased, which is this whole thing. If you've heard in Canada about mail-in ballots, they just threw out to these states mail-in ballots have never done it before. Some states have done it successfully, but you're putting it to some of these states where you're like, are you kidding me? You got the postal service has got to handle them. Are they getting lost? How are they getting counted? Are they real people? If you move, from an apartment or another one, sometimes they send out ballots to your old addresses. So you might have 5 or 6 ballots out there. Now they say there's a barcode and you can't do it, but if it's running through a machine counting it, they're not looking at the name. It's just, ID number. And if it's not the same, or if they just whip them through, you just don't know. So there's a lot of, I guess a cloud of unknown right now in our election. And it's like you said, we're so divisive that it's every side stuck their thing in the ground. There is no fraud here. On the other side, there definitely is fraud. I just want to get to the point where I can feel comfortable as an American citizen. I vote, my vote counts, and there isn't other shenanigans going on.
Yeah. And that makes sense, right? To be able to have that confidence is important, right?
Exactly. Because, it becomes a control issue with politicians, which is another reason I favor term limits for people. You should have term limits. Once you get these people in who've been in for 40 years of their career, they've helped their families, their friends, they do everything. There's always some little thing, it's pay to play or whatever. And once they get the power, they don't like to lose it. So you're thinking, well, what's their odds of saying, hey, I'd like to maybe skew this election by not doing federal IDs. Let's just do mail-in ballots or electronic voting, where you could probably change algorithms for how votes get. I vote for Trump, and every other third one, if it's a vote for Trump, goes to Biden. You little things like that could probably happen in a computer system. So I think people are very, they just kind of think, hey, I'm not too confident in our system right now because there's too many ways to vote. There's no consistency.
I see. Wow. Yeah, that makes it tough. Yeah, and as an American, I'm sure you with your electoral system and explaining like the electoral college, a lot of people don't understand how that works and whatever too, right? But you want that confidence to be looked at by other world leaders that, wow, this is a good, efficient political system. But when you get the turmoil, it kind of maybe changes that perspective a bit too, right?
No. Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, with the electoral college, it would be similar to, and I don't know the Canadian voting system, but it'd be like, hey, if you just did it based on one person, one vote, all the major cities would rule whatever the country does. So if you're out in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, or in Lethbridge or someplace in a smaller community, and then you've got a place, Edmonton, or Calgary, you got major cities that their voting is just going to, that's going to rule the day. And sometimes that's not always good. So I always looked at it as representation of everybody, even if it's small farming communities, everybody should be represented. So the electoral college, I think, works here. I just wish they would do it based on a congressional district. Because if you look at congressional districts in the United States, and I know most Canadian people won't care about the congressional districts, but if you look at all the states, they break them down in each state.
Okay.
And then you'll see that 90% of the states on all of them were Trump voters or were red or conservative people. But all the major Detroit, all the major cities and urban areas were all blue because they had millions and millions of people there. Well, once they put all those votes together, the blue outruns the red. And so even though you look at the state and it's all these sections are all red, there's just 2 areas of blue, but they have primarily most of the people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I guess you could argue that, hey, if 3-4 million people in the city want this, who cares about the people in the country? But I don't think that's the way we should be, looking at it.
Yeah, it's not the way we should. And even here in Canada, like, our provinces are divided up in what they call ridings, and it's provincially and federally, right? So federal riding, you don't have as many divisions, within that province or whatever, right? Like here in Lethbridge, we have one federal candidate per party usually because it's like a district, right?
Right.
Like in the surrounding towns are like one federal riding, whereas provincially you get the east side of Lethbridge, the west side of Lethbridge, that type of thing, right? So it's divided up that way. But even though we might have a say, usually federal governments and provincial governments and whatever state governments, they always do what or provide for the cities more than anything else.
Right.
Where the revenue comes from, it seems like, right? So
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you hit the nail on the head there. That's where the money usually goes, is to the big cities, even the states, and they get all the funding, and they usually put it into programs. The trouble within the states is we don't have a lot of accountability. So you spend billions of dollars and you think, geez, I mean, if you look at California alone where I live, it's almost $500 every year to register one of my vehicles.
Wow.
And I have 4 motorcycles and we have 2 trucks. So, I mean, you're talking $23,000 a year, every year. And then you have our gas taxes. So California brings in so much money, and we have all these problems with homeless people, and San Francisco's going downhill. And we're like, what are you doing with the money? Like, where's this money going? Like, obviously you're not helping people. You just can't give them handouts. You got to train them, get them into technology schools, or get them something where they can get pride into a job. Because once you lose them, like, on welfare or anything else, if you make it easy, they can't turn that corner to all of a sudden want to actually earn a living.
Yeah.
They just take care of them. And once you have that, those people are always going to vote for the government side. Whoever's wrong, they're just going to always get that vote.
Yeah. So California's been especially hit hard through this coronavirus. What was it like with the lockdowns there? Especially, we here in Canada, we look at Los Angeles and the hustle and bustle there, but it was probably pretty eerie during the major lockdown to have like nobody.
Yeah, no, it got kind of, and you always wonder, we've got codes now, purple, blue, red, depending on testing that they're doing. And you look at other places like Sweden, who just kind of said, hey, we're going to run the course. We're going to protect our vulnerable, and we're going to, our young people just keep working, be safe, wear a mask. And they seem to came out of it pretty unscathed, where we down young people, and then all of a sudden said, oh, I guess it's okay, let's let them out. Well, it's like losing, let's let the mobs out, and these kids want to get together, and all of a sudden they're getting more coronavirus, and then the thing gets spread, and then they go back to a lockdown. And I'm like, I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. Let's just protect our vulnerable people, make sure we take care of that, be smart, wear a mask when you go in public, or wear a mask whenever you think you should. I'm one of those ones, I don't like losing my freedom. So
yeah, either that's the big thing with me. And that's why our forefathers fought for those freedoms, and people are just handing them over, and it seems really baffling to me, right?
Yeah.
So,
yep. And there's a lot of fear in this. I mean, everybody's, you keep looking at them going, well, there's a 99, 98%, unless you're over 75 and you've got comorbidity issues, like you've got diabetes, you're overweight, you've got asthma, those are the people you need to protect yourself. But the young people that you see that they say, well, there's young people that get it too and can die from it. Well, you look at them and they're morbidly obese. They're obese. They've got diabetes, and you're like, well, it's a lifestyle change they made, or it's just, unfortunately, that's their genetics and their heredity. The normal flu could have killed them, or something else. And down here, we count everything as a COVID death. So our deaths are skyrocketing, because if you die of a heart attack and they go, well, yeah, you had COVID. Okay, that killed him. No, the heart attack did. But, did COVID have anything to do with it? Who knows? But it's going to be a COVID death, because the hospital will get another $3,900 or whatever they get for every COVID death.
Yeah. Well, we are here too. And I know, I have some family friends that are RNs and stuff, and they say that they would like to blow the whistle on things, but their jobs are on the line, right, through the medical association, right? You say anything about what's going on, because in a lot of cases, the more cases of COVID, the more funding there is for research for vaccines.
Right.
It's pretty sad that way, but that's what one of the nurses told me. So.
No, and that's a driving factor here in the States as well. I mean, it's, they want to see the numbers up. They're getting, but the trouble is my daughter's a physician's assistant, a PA in the Santa Monica area. She did a lot of those tents where they did the testing initially and stuff, and it slowed down to the point where they weren't even using hospital beds. It really went down, but the news media kept pushing these tests. And she says, Dad, I'm more concerned about the suicide and depression I'm getting in the office now, because you got younger people who don't have a job, or their businesses closed. Yeah. The big stores and all these big places are going to survive because they got tons of money behind them. But the mom and pop, shops and the restaurants and the little businesses, hardware stores are closing at a fast rate. Those people are never going to recover, and they won't be able to come back if we keep closing our, this economy down. And so, yeah, it's great. Like me, I'm very happy because I'm retired and I've done some right things financially, and so I'm going to be fine, But I worry about my kids. You worry about your kids and all their futures, and how's this all going to kind of pan out.
Yeah, and with the mom and pop stores, it's the same here. Like Lethbridge here, we've got a lot of businesses that have closed up downtown. Our downtown, sometimes you wonder, wow, the street looks like a ghost town kind of thing in some cases, right? And some of these businesses are, some of them have been established, but it's the newer ones that maybe have been in business for less than 5 years, and they put their house up as collateral, and then both things. You don't recover from that too easily either. No.
We've got a lot of friends in the restaurant business down here, and a lot of them are on pins and needles, or on a very tenuous, path here. If it doesn't improve to the point, they'll shut down, and then they're going to be like, wow, what do we do? There you got more people that I got to go through some sort of welfare and unemployment and some more stuff that just adds to the whole cost of everything. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah, very much so. Tom, it has been a pleasure having you on our show today. Thank you so much for agreeing to do the interview. It's been great learning about you and a little bit about your career and what's happening down there. So continued success in whatever you do, and continued happiness in your retirement. And maybe we can do this again down the road a piece when things settle down a little bit. Would be great too, right?
Would love to. I'd even be able, if you're down, maybe I'll have one of our other hockey guys in here. Ronnie Flockhart comes down. We have a lot of guys that come down here and golf with me. So Ken Hitchcock, coach, he's a member at our club here. So
that would
get quite a hockey guys down here. So anytime you wanted to do that, or I can hook you up with them, that I'd love to do that. I'm sure they'd love.
Awesome. Yeah. Cause I interviewed Kurt Ridley about a year ago.
Okay.
And he's from Manitoba, I believe, or whatever. So I kind of connected with him on Facebook and wanted to see if he would do an interview and that. And yeah, it was great. And he connected me with a hockey group. And I think that's where I connected with you as well. And yeah, it's been great. So really appreciate that so much. And enjoy the rest of your day, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks, Brent. I enjoyed it. And yeah, continued success to you as well. It was a pleasure.
You have a great day.
Thank you.
You've been watching Feel the Beat with DJB here on Jess FM. Appreciate you tuning in. This is DJB saying have a great day. See you, Tom.